those three successes, you want to highlight them because they're very easy to forget. It's easy to dwell on all the tough things and things that didn't go well, but it's good to remember that there were some big successes. So you can, write them in a notebook or your planner so you see them regularly. Put it on a sheet on the wall so you can see what went well. And so that when you're looking at the tough things, you still have some reminders that you did have some wins this year. Welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast. The podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Tourne-Sol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. Today is the final part of the Season Review Challenge, where we look back at all your season reviews and turn them into one. What's going on at Tourne-Sol Farm? Let me tell you a bit about one of the bean threshing experiences I've had this season. We grew out some Monte Gusto pole beans. It's a yellow pole bean, skinny bean, delicious, fairly prolific. And we had pulled the whole plants out and brought them into a greenhouse to dry down. And then we ran them through this, how do I describe it? It's actually a soil shredder that has been speeded down to be able to thresh with it. Some people use a roto hoe or like a wood chipper similarly, but we've been using a soil shredder for this. And generally, it works really well. But with these Monte Gusto beans, I don't know, the wrappers are just so tight around the beans. And I haven't threshed this variety in a while. So anyway, I wound up with so many splits coming out of this. So when I say splits, it means that the bean came out of the pod, but it also split in two. So I have these half beans, and I think I lost like not half the lot, but maybe a third of the lot to splits in the end. Once I figured out what was going on, I was really, really disappointed. And I spoke to Hélène, who used to work at Tourne-Sol, now grows seed on her own farm, and she told me that her and my co-farmer Abib had been threshing with the Monte Gusto a couple years ago when she did work for us, and she had a very similar experience in that she actually just wound up running them over with a tractor to thresh them. And as she told me that, I remembered, and I realized I probably should have been keeping notes on distinct bean varieties and what threshes better and what doesn't. So next time I grow Monte Gusto, I will be probably trying to run it over with a tractor. It's a good bean, but it irritates me, the beans that have really tight pods when they dry down. I really like a bean like Provider, which just splits in two and spits those seeds out of it. Anyway, so pay attention to your beans, because some will thresh better than others. So let's get into some news. First off, the Seed Farmer Mentorship is still open for registrations. There are 6 core modules for the mentorship. Each module is based around a video that goes in depth into the topic, and then a live session to talk about the topic after you've had a chance to watch it and when you have questions. All the details are at the link in the show notes, which I think is spreadsheet.farm/mentorship. So if you go there, you can see all the details for the Seed Farmer Mentorship. In other news, the Organic Seed Alliance has a series of regional seed summits. These regional seed summits bring together seed growers, plant breeders, researchers, educators, and advocates for regionally focused gatherings designed to strengthen local and national organic seed systems through shared learning, relationship building, and collaborative action. So there are 3 regional seed summits coming up. The first one is actually happening today when this episode is released, November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And this is the Midwest Organic Seed Summit, and it's virtual. So depending how quickly you click on the Seed Farmer podcast when it drops in your feed, you might still have time to catch it today. There are also 2 other seed summits coming up. There's the Pacific Northwest Organic Seed Summit on December 6th, and the California Organic Seed Summit on February 20th through 22nd. Both the Pacific and the California Seed Summits are in person. There's a link to the events in the show notes. And then a last thing, and I don't know if you call this news or not, but my daughter told me that I have a bunch of 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. So I think I should look at these. And so here is one from August from Newbie Saver, who said, "Thank you for such good information for a newbie seedaholic. I love learning how to read the plants, collect, and pass on seeds, just for the fun of it." So thank you, Newbie Saver. And I really appreciate any reviews that you want to leave on your podcast platform of choice. I also love any 5-star ratings too. So go and give those. Yeah, and if you have any seedy news that you want me to share, definitely send it my way. And now let's get into today's mini-sode topic. This is the last of the Season Review Challenge episodes. So just to recap, we've had 4 so far. This is number 5. Week 1 was completing your field records, kind of talked about harvest and planting records specifically. Week 2 was reviewing with your team, trying to figure out how to get some insight from folks who are paying attention to things that you might not be paying attention to. Week 3 was reviewing your sales channels. We talked about bulk seed. We talked about package sales. And then week 4 was reviewing with your clients, kind of a bit of a continuation of the sales channel conversation. And today, week 5, is time to take stock of what you've learned. It's where we gather everything together. So you could do this on, I guess, a piece of paper if you want, or you can open a text document or a spreadsheet on your computer, and you could kind of divide into 4 sections, one for each of these weeks, and then kind of for each of them have a column, what went well, what challenges still remain. So for each of your different reviews this season, you want to probably find 3 things at least to put down. You can put more than that if you want, but don't try to capture everything, but just kind of 3 good things, for your field records review, and 3 challenges for your field records review, and the key ones that come to you. So for us on our farm, in the field review, some of the things that we didn't like so much came out to be, we completely lost the planting of sweet corn to raccoons, and it happened pretty close to the barn in an area where you usually don't have raccoons, and it happened fairly quickly over about a week or so, and we didn't really have a chance to respond, so that was very disappointing. We also had overwintered a bunch of Brussels sprouts in a greenhouse, and we lost some of those to rodents. And then we had a Tithonia harvest. Tithonia is a little bit like a small sunflowery type flower with red petals and a yellow center. I've grown it before, but it's still a relatively new seed crop. And we ran it through the thresher this year, and that was a mistake. And all the non-seed flower parts and stem got broken into little pieces, the exact same shape and size of the Tithonia seed. And I have not been able to clean it out. So that was definitely a not win. So those are 3 things that on my personal review in the seeds in the field, I was not thrilled with. A couple things that went well. We had a phenomenal melon season, both in terms of quality. They were really delicious. We had a lot of fruit, and we had great seed yield. And this may have been a big consequence of the drought that we had and the heat that we had. So kind of silver linings to an otherwise tough situation for some stuff, but that was definitely really enjoyable. There's nothing like eating delicious melons, and what's really great is you can still keep the seed from them, even if you've eaten them. Another thing that worked really well this year was we decided to grow radishes on 1 row instead of 2 on bare soil. We've been just moving back to bare soil in the last couple of years, and it's been hard to keep control of weeds with 2 rows of seed crops on bare soil, just because the plant is so tall and it's hard to get in there. So we did 1 row of radishes per bed, and that was fantastic and very good weed control. Made us very happy about that. And then, in our sales channels review, one challenge was that our rack sales were lower than usual this year. So we didn't like that. But our online sales direct to customers were higher than usual. So that was really great. And then you go and so forth. You kind of go through your different reviews and you catch at least 3 good things and 3 negative things for each of the reviews. So you have some stuff to look at. Once you have your list, you want to look at this, what you've highlighted as successes, and highlight your 3 biggest successes of the season. I'm not going to go deeper into that part in this episode. Just those 3 successes, you want to highlight them because they're very easy to forget. It's easy to dwell on all the tough things and things that didn't go well, but it's good to remember that there were some big successes. So you can, write them in a notebook or your planner so you see them regularly, put them in your planning documents, or just you can put it on a sheet on the wall so you can see what went well. And so that when you're looking at the tough things, you still have some reminders that you did have some wins this year. Successes aside, you also want to do this for the 3 biggest challenges that you had this season. And we'll spend a little bit more time on these. So for each of the challenges, you should write out kind of the problem in a clear statement. Our biggest problem this year was not the Tithonia, but the Tithonia is one that is definitely on my mind because I've just been dealing with it lately, and it's easy to talk about in the podcast, so I'll use that as an example. But so I just write up something like, running the Tithonia through the thresher resulted in a bunch of sticks the same size that I have not been easily able to separate out with the tools that we have on hand. So kind of write something like a clear statement for each of the biggest problems. And you want to do that just to make sure you understand what actually was a problem. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but just being able to clearly define the problem makes it easier to have a solution with later. And it makes it not just be like a negative thought or a gut feeling that you have, but just trying to flesh it out a little bit more. The other thing you want to do is when you're looking at these 3 biggest challenges on the farm, and I guess in this case we're looking at biggest seed challenges, you want to highlight the biggest one, the biggest bottleneck on your farm. Like as a general total season review, it might not be a seed challenge, your biggest bottleneck. But here we're going to focus ourselves to your seed work. And really knowing what your biggest bottleneck is really important because that's like the most important thing to address. And what that bottleneck is if you don't do better with that, it's going to compromise everything else that you're doing on your farm. Now, that is an important thing to look at. I'm not going to dwell tons on that. I'm just going to talk a bit about some of the ways that you then address the problems that you've highlighted. Going back to Tithonia, which is by no means the biggest bottleneck on the farm, but as I said, definitely frustrated me a lot. But let's get into this next step of what to do once you've got a problem, is you want to solve it. And there are 3 main things that you might think of when you're solving a problem. So there might be a tool solution, there might be a system solution, there might be a planning solution. Those are 3 ways that I think of solutions often at this point of the season. So kind of going to tool solutions. What would be a tool solution for my Tithonia problem? Maybe there's a fancy Tithonia thresher out there I could use that does a great job. That's not really a route I'm going to be looking for. I suspect there isn't. But another tool approach might be, maybe I should, instead of be trying to harvest it and run it through a thresher, is I should think about just taking the plants, putting them over a tarp or a piece of landscape fabric and hitting them with a stick and seeing what shatters out, and which is what I do with a lot of things. So maybe I should try that with the Tithonia. So that would be like an alternate, that'd be a kind of a tool solution, one like a high-tech approach, one like a low-tech approach. And I do think I actually am going to try that next year. That's probably where I'm going to go with, but that'd be like a tool solution. Another would be to think a bit about system solution. It's like, how is the processes that I'm working with led to this problem? One of the things that happened this year is when I first saw the first Tithonia seed on the seed heads, the birds also saw them. And I wasn't able to get to them right away. And maybe I need to be acting either quicker to catch those seeds and shake them out into a bin, or to cover them maybe with mesh netting, like an onion bag or something, to protect them from the birds. There's a lot of little flowers, so I don't know that I want to protect them, but I might want to race the birds to get them. I'm not 100% sure about that part of the system solution, but like this year I did at one point just went in and cut the whole plants and brought them in and put them on tarps. Maybe I should have actually been cutting individual branches as they were starting to have mature seed on them. And that's maybe a little bit more of a system solution, is that kind of figuring out the timing and getting in there and just making a point of cutting the branches that have seed a certain way. I mean, I think of Tithonia and sunflowers very similar in my head, though they are very different flowers. But that's kind of what we do with sunflowers, is once I can start to rub off the middle of the flower and I can see the seed underneath it, I start cutting branches at that point to make sure I get them before the critters get them. The Tithonia is a little bit different, but I think I could do something like that. So that'd be a system solution. And then, a planning solution would be something like more that the crop planning or the choice of crops going in. So it could be, I crop plan to have extra plants so that if I lose a lot to birds, I don't mind. I still get the amount that I need. Maybe I don't have as many thoughts about the planning solutions specifically for Tithonia. But one part of it is, let's say I've been dealing with this Tithonia problem for like 3 or 4 years and just not figuring out how to conquer the problem or deal with the problem, solve the problem. Maybe one of the solutions is to drop Tithonia as a seed crop, or to only grow it for our personal use, where we might sow it in the ground with a bunch of sticks in it, and then it's still going to come up, but we couldn't sell that, so maybe we drop it as a crop that we sell. Like that would be, so this is not actually where the reality is right now, but if it's something that I've been struggling with for a few years, that might be what the solution to do. And that's one thing, here we're talking about seed crops, but just even in a larger picture on a market farm, it's important to remember that it's okay to drop crops if they're not working for your farm, if they're not profitable, if they're not efficient, if you really don't enjoy working with them, if your clients don't like them, especially if your clients don't like them. Those are all reasons that you might consider dropping a crop. You may also, dropping sales outlets and sales channels is also something that sometimes that's the right solution to do. If you have too many sales channels, choose a couple to cull and put your attention on others. We're not really getting into sales in this specific case. Yes, it's fun to buy new tools. It's fun to have a larger toolkit to do things with. But sometimes the solution is more just maybe you don't grow a thing, or maybe it's that you go in and harvest it a little bit earlier so that you get it at the right time. So all those are different ways to think through how you can deal with the challenges that are on your season review sheet. So this going back to the dropping of crop or sales channels, that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. There's other crops that you might want to try, or other crops that you might want to invest in or do better with. Or maybe you just want to have more time to do something else on your farm or in your life. So all of that, comes down to tools, systems, planning. Those are different strategies you have to solve your challenges. Planning is really, I think, the most important. And I guess I should tie the Seed Farmer Mentorship in here at this point. We'll definitely be looking at some of these systems and planning approaches to growing seed on a farm or market farm or in your garden, whether it's a few crops or a lot of crops. That's something that we'll definitely be talking about in the Seed Farmer Mentorship. So that might be something that appeals to you. And as I mentioned, the registration is open. There's a link in the show notes. Perhaps I'll see you in the mentorship. And in the meantime, it's time for you to gather all your season review data and go in and, choose your 3 biggest challenges, but also figure out your biggest successes and celebrate those successes. And that's another mini-sode of the Seed Farmer Podcast. If you've enjoyed the season review challenge, please let me know. If you've learned something on your farm that you were really surprised to learn, please let me know also. I want to know what aha moments you've had. So thank you to Sophie Dalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiedaldalton.com. Thank you to Molly Brisebois for editing the episode. And thank you so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, A Complete Guide to Growing, Using, and Selling Your Own Seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.